Now to the double murder in Wilson County. We're learning the suspect is charged with killing his own brother and his mother. Police identifying the victims as 50-year-old Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren Cox.
March 25, 2025, Wilson, North Carolina. Dana Vanessa Jenkins, a 50-year-old single mother, was having the best day of her life. Her eldest son, 25-year-old Daron Jenkins, was finally walking out of prison after serving over 5 years. 5 long years of visiting him behind bars, of sleepless nights wondering if he'd ever change, of maintaining hope when everyone else had given up. She posted on Facebook, "My baby is a home lord. I thank you," which got thousands of views and comments. Those words would haunt investigators later. Because what Dana didn't know, what none of us could know, is that she had just invited her own killer into her home. Daron Jenkins was a dangerous repeat offender with a record of serious charges. In December 2021, he was convicted of larceny of firearms, breaking and entering motor vehicles, and, here's the kicker, malicious conduct by a prisoner. That last charge says it all. Even while locked up, Daron was a problem. He couldn't follow the rules in prison, the most controlled environment possible, yet his mother believed he'd do fine in the real world. Now, I'm not blaming Dana. A mother's love is unconditional, and that's a beautiful thing, though. But from a criminal psychology perspective, the warning signs were flashing in neon. The nature of his crimes. Larceny of firearms isn't petty theft. It points to a pattern of seeking out weapons and gravitating toward violence-adjacent behavior. Successful reintegration is usually gradual. Halfway houses, supervised release, counseling. Daron went straight from a prison cell to his mother's home with almost no oversight. But Dana Jenkins didn't see the risk. She saw her son, and she saw hope. Also in that home was 15-year-old Darren Cox, Dana's younger son and Daron's half-brother. Darren was everything Daron was not. An honor student at Bedingfield High School with dreams of becoming a pastor. Friends called him the life of the party, full of energy and humor. His future was wide open. For 6 days, life seemed normal. The family was together. Dana's prayers appeared answered. But under the surface, something dark was taking shape, something violent that no one saw coming. In the 6 days between Daron's release and the murders, his behavior signaled a dangerous instability. Neighbors reported that he was acting in ways that drew uneasy attention, behavior that unsettled people, even if they couldn't clearly explain why. This was not a smooth reintegration into civilian life. His instability was visible to outsiders, yet no one, not his mother, not the neighbors, and not any supervising authority, intervened. The lack of recognition and response to these warning signs proved fatal. Post-release supervision in North Carolina is often minimal. Overcrowded caseloads, strained budgets, and limited resources mean that many former inmates receive only cursory monitoring. In Daron's case, there is no evidence of meaningful counseling, regular drug testing, or consistent mental health support. That absence left him free to spiral unchecked. Family annihilation cases rarely occur without clear precursors. The perpetrator typically experiences a buildup of stressors that create a volatile emotional state. Daron's stressors were stacking: the pressure of re-entering society after prison, the barriers to employment with a criminal record, unresolved family tensions, and financial instability. Together, these created a perfect storm. Monday, March 31, 2025, Wilson, North Carolina. The sun lit up Snowden Drive Southeast, a quiet street where life moved slowly and crime felt like something that happened elsewhere. By 5:23 p.m., that illusion was shattered. The street became the site of one of the most shocking double murders in the city's history. A family member, concerned after failing to reach Dana Jenkins, went to check on her at the 1700 block of Snowden Drive. They were met with a disturbing sight. Dana's brother answered the door. Blood was visible. Cleaning supplies were scattered. Dana wasn't picking up her phone. The 911 call that followed was blunt and chilling. There was blood all over the place. When Wilson police arrived, they stepped into a nightmare. Inside the duplex apartment lay the bodies of 50-year-old Dana Vanessa Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren Cox. Both had been shot in the head at close range. There were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no indication of a struggle. This was not a burglary gone wrong. It was targeted, deliberate, and deeply personal. The scene revealed the unthinkable. Dana had opened her home to someone she trusted, someone who crossed the threshold not as an intruder but as family. That trust was answered with execution-style killings, one bullet for a mother, one for her son. It was violence rooted in betrayal, the kind of crime that doesn't just take lives but leaves a permanent scar on everyone left behind. By the evening of March 31st, Wilson police had their suspect, Daron Jenkins, the same man Dana had celebrated bringing home just 6 days earlier. The arrest happened at the duplex on Snowden Drive. There was no manhunt, no cross-state pursuit. Daron was still there, inside the same home where he had executed his mother and half-brother. Remaining at the scene after committing such violence is uncommon. Many killers flee immediately, attempting to escape capture. Daron did not. His decision to stay placed him directly into police custody within hours of the murders. The charges were as severe as North Carolina law allows, 2 counts of first-degree murder, a charge that can carry the death penalty. Authorities made it clear this was being prosecuted as premeditated, calculated murder, not a crime of passion or an act driven by temporary mental collapse. Neighbors told investigators that Daron had been exhibiting unsettling behavior since his release from prison. Dana's cousin, Wanilla Corney, described him as looking strange and acting in ways that drew concern. Yet no one anticipated the violence he would unleash. This case underscores a grim truth about family violence. Danger often comes from within. The people we trust the most can, in rare but devastating cases, become the ones who destroy us. Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox deserve to be remembered for the lives they lived, not only for the violence that ended them. Dana Jenkins was a cornerstone of her community. Bishop Sherman Blandon, a family friend, described her loss as devastating. She was a single mother who worked tirelessly to hold her family together. She believed in redemption, in second chances, and in the transformative power of love. Dana was also a mother to a daughter, who survived this tragedy but lost both her mother and brother in one act of violence. The murders did more than claim 2 lives. They fractured an entire family. She was known for posting motivational messages on social media, embodying resilience and ambition. Her words, "Bosses don't talk, we just sit back and listen then make boss moves," reflected her drive to improve herself, provide for her children, and create stability despite the challenges of single parenthood. Darren Cox, just 15 years old, was a student at Bedingfield High School with aspirations of becoming a pastor. Friends called him the life of the party, someone who could brighten a room simply by entering. He was energetic, playful, and full of optimism. Darren embodied the hope Dana had worked for, a child who would break cycles, honor her sacrifices, and create a better future. His death deeply impacted the community. The school district brought in crisis counselors to support grieving students. Teachers, friends, and neighbors mourned not just the loss of a teenager, but the loss of his potential. A life of promise cut short in the most brutal way possible. Wilson, North Carolina had never faced a case like this. Family annihilation was not part of the town's history. These were crimes more often associated with large urban centers, not a small, tightly knit community where neighbors knew each other by name. The aftermath was jarring. Industrial cleaning crews in full hazmat suits moved in and out of the Snowden Drive home, preparing it for deep cleaning. Their presence was a stark visual marker of the violence that had taken place behind those walls. Local churches organized prayer services. Residents rallied to support the surviving family members, especially Dana's daughter, who had lost both her mother and brother in a single act of violence. Bishop Sherman Blandon, who had spoken with Dana and Darren only days earlier, called the loss very difficult, confusing, troubling. For him, they were not just victims in a report. They were people he knew, cared about, and never expected to lose under such circumstances. The psychological impact on Wilson was profound. A mother murdered by her own son shattered the community's sense of safety. Trust, once assumed, was now questioned. The crime became a lasting reminder that danger can come from within the circle of those we believe we know best. On April 1, 2025, April Fool's Day in name only, Daron Jenkins made his first court appearance. Assistant District Attorney Holly Rabel requested the highest possible bond, citing the severity of the charges and Jenkins's extensive criminal record. She described him as a dangerous offender who had committed the ultimate betrayal against those who loved him most. Judge Matthew Sporrett agreed, setting bond at $2.5 million. In practical terms, this ensured Jenkins would remain in custody throughout the legal process. There would be no opportunity for release while awaiting trial. The hearing underscored the sharp contrast between the optimism of the previous week and the grim reality now unfolding. Just days earlier, Dana Jenkins had publicly celebrated her son's return. Now that same son appeared in court in shackles, charged with her murder and the murder of his half-brother. The prosecution prepared for a case centered on premeditated murder. The defense faced questions about Jenkins's mental state and competency. Investigators, however, had yet to identify a definitive motive. No prior reports of domestic violence, no documented family disputes, and no clear triggering event had surfaced to explain the killings. Family annihilation cases are among the most disturbing in criminal psychology. They represent a complete collapse of the most fundamental human bonds. Studies show that most family annihilators share certain traits. They are typically male, they have experienced a major life stressor, and they often display a history of controlling or manipulative behavior. Daron Jenkins does not fit the standard profile. He was not the head of a household seeking to maintain control. He was not facing divorce or financial collapse. He had just been released from prison and welcomed home by family members who believed in his redemption. Several factors may have influenced his actions. Extended incarceration can create deep psychological scars. 5 years in prison exposes an individual to constant threat, rigid control, and dehumanizing conditions, all of which can alter thought patterns and behavior. Re-entry into society can also trigger severe adjustment difficulties. The shift from a highly structured prison environment to the unstructured demands of civilian life often overwhelms those who have become institutionalized. Without supervision and support, the pressure can escalate into crisis. The absence of comprehensive mental health screening and treatment in the prison system leaves many offenders with untreated psychological disorders at the time of release. If Jenkins had an underlying condition, it may have gone unaddressed. Whatever the combination of factors, the result was lethal. Within days of release, Jenkins murdered the 2 people who had shown him unconditional love and trust, leaving no opportunity for intervention. The system failed Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox. Daron Jenkins was released on post-release supervision. In North Carolina, this process often amounts to little more than brief monthly check-ins with an overburdened probation officer. Counseling is minimal, monitoring is limited, and meaningful reintegration support is rare. There is no public record confirming whether Jenkins was required to attend anger management classes, undergo drug testing, or receive mental health evaluations. Given his history, including malicious conduct in prison and prior weapons-related offenses, such safeguards should have been mandatory. The warning signs were present. Neighbors noticed unsettling behavior in the days after his release. His disciplinary record in prison documented violent tendencies. His criminal history showed a clear pattern involving weapons and confrontational conduct. Yet no coordinated effort was made to address these risks. These failures reflect systemic weaknesses in assessing readiness for release, providing structured support during re-entry, and protecting communities from individuals with a demonstrated capacity for violence. For Dana and Darren, those weaknesses proved fatal. The absence of intervention allowed a dangerous man to return home unchecked, and within 6 days he killed the 2 people who had welcomed him back. Even with Daron Jenkins in custody and awaiting trial, significant gaps remain in the understanding of this case. His mental state during the 6 days between release and the murders has not been fully established. Investigators have not determined whether the killings were premeditated or the result of a sudden escalation. The events of March 31st that led directly to the murders remain unclear. The decision to kill both his mother and half-brother points to a deliberate act of total familial destruction. In typical family annihilation cases, victims are targeted according to a distorted internal logic. In this instance, there is no evidence that 15-year-old Darren Cox posed any threat. He was an aspiring pastor and a respected student, making his death appear purely as collateral to Jenkins's intent to eliminate those closest to him. Financial gain, inheritance disputes, or hidden family conflicts have not been substantiated as motives. The more plausible explanation is that Jenkins' capacity for empathy and meaningful human connection had deteriorated beyond repair, leading to an act of pure violence. The absence of a clear motive makes the crime especially unsettling. Violence from strangers can be rationalized as situational or avoidable. Violence from within the family removes that sense of control, revealing the devastating truth that danger can exist at the heart of the relationships we depend on most. This case stands as a clear example of systemic failure. Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox were not protected, and the warning signs surrounding Daron Jenkins went unaddressed. With stronger supervision, mandatory mental health intervention, and closer monitoring, this tragedy may have been prevented. Reform in post-release supervision, re-entry support, and risk assessment is essential to keep communities safe. At True Crime Red Flag, we examine not just the crimes themselves, but the psychological patterns and systemic weaknesses that allow them to happen. If you value in-depth, fact-driven analysis, subscribe and turn on notifications. Each week, we deliver cases that challenge how we think about safety, trust, and the warning signs we too often ignore. This has been True Crime Red Flag, where we expose the cases that shock us, the psychology that drives them, and the systems that fail us. Stay aware, trust your instincts, and remember, the greatest threats are not always strangers in the dark. Sometimes they're sitting across the dinner table.